usually do.
Oh, okay. So I think what I want us to achieve today is what a Roman villa is and what a Roman villa isn't. And when we start thinking about what a Roman villa is and what a Roman villa isn't, Michael, what's a Roman villa?
Just a big farmhouse.
I like the way you said it's just a big farmhouse in a Roman context. Yeah, Brian, what's a Roman villa?
Well, I thought it was the whole village, really, the main house and stuff that's all around it.
Actually, technically, on a technicality, both of you are right, but not right, but technically right. John.
Just a big house.
Oh, hang on. Technically, he can be right as well because he said a big farmhouse. Do you know? And the next person's going to say, "Oh, right." Anyway, moving on. Right. So, all of you are technically right. But what a Roman villa is a building that has a hypercore system, so it's got a central heating system. It's got a roof, usually tiled. It's usually on more than one floor. So you've got a basement, ground floor, and first floor. Bathhouse. Don't do the full Monty Python sketch, please. And also, it's a main building with ancillary buildings around as well. So you're right, it's a main building. It's in the countryside, so technically it can be a farmhouse, and it's a big house. So you're all right. But you need those other attributes to it. It's got mosaic floors in it as well, which again makes it a villa. It's got painted wall plaster, which makes it a villa. It's got a number of people living there, which comes into what Brian mentioned, which stands it alone, i.e. a lone farmhouse and a lone house. It stands it alone away from, say, a farmstead or a village or a town or a fort, right? So it is a very special central axle. And when you think about a Roman villa, what we've got to think about is the concept of the model farm. And model farms were being established in the 1800s, 1820s, 1830s. That's when they started to get big. And what a model farm is that they made best use of somebody who owned the land. So basically, everything would come to one spot. So people outlying farms had to bring all their sheep and all their pigs to the one area to be processed, all their grains to the one area to be processed. So this is a practice that's been going on for a very long time. It all started off not just with the Romans, but before as well. Because in Britain, you've got the idea of what would be called a hill fort. Now, a hill fort itself is a locality that all the grain would be brought to, and all the cattle would be brought to be collected and to be distributed and to be looked after. So this idea of keeping everything in one spot isn't an old idea, but the word villa is the new term that we use to keep everything together. And obviously throughout the ages it's got different terms. A monastery, a monastic grange, is a type of villa. So this concept of keeping everything in one spot, somebody controlling everything, isn't a new concept, is a very, very old concept indeed. So this is where we're going to go today, and I've got to take a note to remind me of something. Done it. This site itself is the Roman villa, which is still under the surface, which is still there today. We've got approximately about 1.5 meters, probably under that actually, because that's foot rules, but 1.5 meters of walls still standing at the site, but they're all covered up. This is the Roman site at Caer Mead, sometimes known as the Roman villa at Llanmaes, the Roman villa at Llantwit Major. So in Wales itself, about 30 years ago, we only knew of just a handful of Roman villas in Wales, and we didn't really think the Romans did much in Wales. Now we've got about 24 Roman villas have been found in Wales. So what happens is you've got all these outlying farms, and they would bring all their goods to one spot. So it's disappeared. It's come back. Interestingly enough, with this image, can you spot the human bones? The human bones here. There's down by there, yeah. And the body's sort of crouched. So the spinal bone's going in that way, and these are the leg bones, and the feet are there. At this site, we found over 40 sets of human remains, which have been excavated from the 1880s all the way through to the 1970s at different periods. And I've got the absolute pleasure of meeting one of the people who originally was part of the excavation team in the 1940s, right? It's the only time I've ever chatted up an 8-year-old woman. I gave a lecture in Llantwit Major about 4 years ago, and I was talking about the Roman villa at Llantwit Major, and she said, "Oh, I worked on the excavation," and I'm thinking, well, you couldn't have worked on the excavations in the 1880s. You're not that old. You probably worked on the excavations in 1971 now. And she said, I worked with Nash Williams on the excavations, and I thought, hang on a minute, he was working there in 1948. So I said, were you there in, she could have actually been working there in the 1930s as well. It was wonderful. So she said, yeah, I was working on the excavations. I thought, oh my God. So I forgot everyone else was in the room, right? And we just talked about her exploits on the excavation. It was great. So this site is still there. It's got a mosaic still in place. It's not being lifted up and put in a museum. Unfortunately, a lot of damage is occurring to the site today. Oh, there's a bit more of a close-up there. You can see all the different levels. You've got human remains here. You've got a bit of carved stone as well. Lots of carved stone was found at this site. And as we're still at this site, and we've got a location plan coming up, I'll tell you another little bit of a story. That's how those in. In the 1880s, 1886, 1887, in his own notes, an archaeologist says, I found this Roman villa because I happened to be wandering around Llantwit Major, as you do, looking for mushrooms. And probably, yeah. But weirdly enough, on a couple of other occasions, he's said to have found Roman sites associated with mushrooms, right? Apparently he found a coin hoard in Barry in 1899 associated with mushrooms. But the problem is he wasn't the first person to find the site at all. Because in the 1790s, there was somebody whose work has been discredited, but I think it's actually quite good. A guy by the name of Iolo Morganwg. Iolo Morganwg, otherwise known as Edward Williams, was an antiquarian. He invented lots of things with the Druids and the Celts and all the rest of it, stuff I don't like. But he wrote about lots of archaeological sites in the area. But all his work was dismissed as nonsense. And one thing that he wrote was that at Llanmaes, near the road, it's in my own book, by the way, I mentioned it. He says that a sort of square temple area has been found. And lying on the surface are bits of Roman column and bits of carved stone and statues and all sorts of things. And people say he's talking out of his arse. He's made it up completely. That's the language they're using. He's completely making it up. He's a nut job, right? But what history doesn't tell you is that John Story got hold of those notes, located the site, and took all the credit. How do we know that Iolo Morganwg was correct in the 1790s? It's quite simple. When he was, by the time John Story got there in the 1880s, the local farmer said, if you'd have come here 50 years ago, right, there was carved stone on the surface, and there was bits of statues on the surface, and there were bits of Roman column. And John Story said, hang on a minute, where are they now? Oh, my dad took them all up off the field and built our house with them. So do you know who actually discovered it? It was that nut job in the 1790s whose work had been completely discredited. but another archaeologist got the credit. There's lots of history like that in archaeology, but we won't go any further. So we're going to compare it as well with a site in England, a Roman villa down at Lullingstone. If you know about Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, you go from where's my pen, over here from Canterbury all the way along this route, along Watling Street, passing this Roman villa all the way through to London. So this is a really important site at Lullingstone, very important site. And what I want to do is just sort of nuancely sort of compare two different Roman sites in Britain, really, with our local one and one in England, in Lullingstone, Kent. That's what survives there today. Now, I love it. I love it when I'm able to compare Wales with England, right? In England, you've got about 20 Roman villas nicely displayed. You can see the mosaics and frescoes, and some of them under sort of wonderful hangars like this at Lullingstone, right? We've got some really nice Roman villas in Wales, and they're just in fields being destroyed by farmers, you know. And some unwittingly destroyed by farmers, but grazing allowed there, and so on. So the ones who are untimely responsible are the ones that control what happens to these sites. In England, on the other hand, you can go and see these beautiful sites displayed, with, in fact, over there, instead of ripping the mosaic out and putting it in the British Museum or somewhere else, there's a big mosaic there, still on the ground. You can see it. And some of the original painted wall plaster still in place at this site. And the rooms themselves, some of the walls at this site still stand about 3.5, 4 meters in height. Amazing. So you've got basements, you've got stairs. What you can see at this minute is the ground floor level. You can see how high some of the walls are there. Some steps going up to another level. It's beautiful. We don't have this type of archaeology at our site. We're going to call it our site, the Llantwit Major site, so you know what I'm talking about, our site. Because in England, their sites developed about 50 years, 100 years before our sites. So by the time the end of Roman Britain comes, between about 420, 430, about 470, right? All these sites are really much in decline. And all this sort of major building really didn't hit Wales. But this type of stuff was going on in England. There you go. Moving on again. So this wonderful site at this wonderful site down in Lullingstone. Look, it's quite interesting. We've got this is the main entrance hall, right? And you go through the main entrance here into a sub-reception room and a main reception room. Who mentioned bathhouse? It's got its own bathhouse. In fact, our Roman villa also has a bathhouse. It's got hypocausts, basically underfloor heating, just like our site as well. So this site is being built sometime in about the 80s AD. Our site is being built after the 100s AD in Wales, so we're a bit later. It's on a major route. By the AD 150s, it's a big establishment. And what we do find is some wonderful carved statuary there as well, which has been excavated on the site. It's got a mausoleum, a circular, outside the site that is, in a field nearby. It's got a circular mausoleum, which is a burial chamber. And a circular mausoleum, which is a burial chamber. We have something very similar on our site as well. So there's lots of similarities. And there's keen links with religion, with our site and this site as well. It's said that both sites, the one at Lullingstone and our site, have early signs of Christianity, which is really, really important. That we're identifying Christianity and its evolution in Britain well before anything else. And it's sites like these that we can look towards, starting to think that actually the Romans brought Christianity to Britain. The legacy, amazingly enough, of the Romans is Christianity. And I can remember there was Mary Beard, the archaeologist who presents stuff on TV, right? About 2 years ago, I quoted something Mary Beard said. She said in her program, she said, people don't want to hear this, but the legacy of Rome is Christianity. And when I actually said that in the room, I actually had the church pastor in the room in my class in Bridgend. She said, "No, that's absolute nonsense. That can't be the case. Blah blah blah." She got really, really upset. She got very, very upset, and I think she got upset because we always paint the Romans as being horrible, nasty people, and so on and so on. But if it wasn't for the Romans, Christianity wouldn't have spread anywhere. It was the Romans responsible for spreading it everywhere. That's the point. I don't think there's anything wrong with me saying that you've got signs of Christianity at this site. You've got signs of Christianity at our one as well. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just accepting that Christianity got here before all those saints and Saint David and Saint George and all that nonsense. Okay, so that's really important. That's really powerful. So you mentioned about having the Roman villa and you had other functions around it, other buildings. Well, Lullingstone, you've got a large granary as well, so that's evidence that stuff is coming nearby. And you've got the wonderful mosaic that's been found. Like lots of these sites, they're found by accident, if not found by finding magic mushrooms in a field. Or this one was, it said that the first discovery of the site was in the 1750s. And luckily enough, it was left alone. Because if they'd have dug it up in the 1750s, there'd be nothing left today. The amount of tragic stories that I hear that people were digging things up in the 1700s, and you've got walls standing and now there's nothing. It's down to the fact that they were just left. But this site is interestingly left, and in the 1930s, a tree is blown down, and at the one at Lullingstone, and lo and behold, some mosaic pieces are revealed. And in the 1940s, 1949, they're excavating the site. And interesting enough, they're re-excavating big parts of our site as well in 1948. So this one's being excavated in 1949. Our one's being excavated in 1948. So you've got those nice little links there. It's when Roman archaeology becomes of interest again in this country. We go through phases of interest in British archaeology. We were once interested in hill forts and burial chambers and all the rest of it in the 1920s, and in the 1930s, 1940s, we're interested in Roman villas, and then we got a phase that we're starting to be interested in the industrial archaeology of Britain. So it goes through various phases, and in the 1960s, they decide to cover it with like a hanger, so you could actually see the archaeology. So it's protected, which is a good thing to do. And by the and interesting enough, they were still excavating large tracts of it. I can remember the 1980s and 1990s. And the other link is one of the big archaeologists that used to work around here, Dr. Wilkinson, ended up working down at Lullingstone as the organizer of works down at Lullingstone. There you go. And you'll notice the other thing underneath there. So you all notice that symbol there. So the one from mosaic, you've got a bit of a close-up coming up as well. So you've got the mosaic still there on site, and it's seen in the main dining room. So you've got the entrance hall, and you've got the bigger hall as well, the dining room. It's known as a triclinium, and you've got different depictions on it. And down below, which you'll all be familiar with. Okay, I always call it the Chio Rio design, but it's the. Oh right, the Kai Rao design. Yes, the Chi Rio design. Yeah, the Chio Rio. There you go. CHIRHO. I always call it the Chio Rio, but that was associated with early Christianity. That's the symbolism that they actually used. And when they were excavating, they found a couple of busts as well, beautiful marble busts in there as well. So they found these. And one of the mosaic designs that are actually depicted are actually continental depictions, which we'll see. One depicts the abduction of Europa by the god Jupiter, who is disguised as a bull. So when we get to the image, you'll be able to work that one out. So Europa's kidnapped by a bull, otherwise known as Jupiter. And the other depicts Bellerophon slaying the Chimera surrounded by sea creatures. So when we go to that, we can have a look at that. But what is fascinating about this site is that when they excavated this site at Lullingstone, and this will link us nicely into our site as well. When they excavated this site at Lullingstone, they found a pagan site which was still being used at the same time as a Christian site. And I'm going to say it as it is. In the early stages, Christianity was a cult, okay? It was part of the different beliefs within the Roman Empire. It was in the year 347 on the death of Constantine the Great, that 337 that Christianity was proclaimed the official religion of the Roman Empire, when it actually became a religion. Before then, it was just a bog standard cult, okay, which is very difficult for people to take. But then again, lots of things about Christianity are difficult to take. But then again, that's life, that's religion for you, isn't it? So in this building, one room of the building had been used as both a pagan shrine and above a Christian chapel, being used at the same time. Basically, they were hedging their bets. It goes to say here, the original pagan shrine room was dedicated to local water deities in the basement, and a wall painting depiction 3 water nymphs, and there was a little bit of a niche there. By about the 200s, the niche was covered over, and they decided that it was going to be used for some other religious function. Some scholars have theorized that the point that the inhabitants focused their worship on household deities and ancestor spirits, largely abandoning the worship of the water deities. So that's fine, which is probably quite common with Roman sites. But in the 300s, probably in about the 330s, 340s, the room above, okay, not the room below, but the room above was converted into a Christian chapel. And we know that by the paintings, the frescoes painted on the wall above from the fragments. We know that. A little bit more about this, but they're hedging their bets. So if in the afterlife it isn't actually the pagan gods and we've got Christianity, then they've been worshipping them both. If Christianity isn't the place you go to afterwards, then you can go to the pagan gods. Best way to do it. So in other words, it's like being a pagan at the same time as being a Muslim, or a Muslim at the same time as being a Jew. You're just hedging your bets. So this is what this says. This is what I've just said. The evidence of the Christian house church is a unique discovery from Roman Britain, and the wall paintings are of international importance. Not only do they provide some of the earliest evidence for Christianity in Britain, they are almost unique. But Christianity being found at sites in Britain isn't unique. That's the point. It's that level of interest that we've actually got wall paintings that they're talking about. And there's parallel to this being found in Syria. Perhaps almost as remarkable as the discovery of the house church is the possibility that pagan worship may have continued in the cult room below. What is not clear is whether this represented the family hedging their bets, as I've already mentioned, trumpeting their apparent acceptance of Christianity while trying to keep the old gods happy, or whether it represents some members of the family clinging to old beliefs in the face of the adopting of Christianity by others. So that could be the other thing. So you've got 20 people in the household, 10 remain Christian, and the other remain pagan. So it's a bit like having a household. Half of them vote Plaid Cymru and the rest vote Conservative. So there you go.
It's the thing that existing to my mind is in Spain. We've got a Roman Catholic Church, which is also used by the Anglo Catholics.
Really?
Yeah. We go on a Saturday night to go to the Roman Catholic service, and on a Sunday we go to the Anglo Catholic service.
Does that actually happen? Well, that's nice, isn't it? I'm glad they've accepted that.
It seems to be quite a common, they said, oh, you've never seen something like this, and I thought, oh no, I haven't, but I have, several times, And, yeah. Certainly with Saturday night is the night the Roman Catholics use.
Yeah.
And then Sunday then can be Roman Catholics in the morning and Anglo Catholics or what do we call it?
Episcopalian or whatever, yeah.
Episcopalians.
Yeah.
Use it in the evening.
Cool. Back to the other thing about this. Right, so the bit about Christianity, right? When we go to our site, it's long been thought in the history rather than the archaeology that our site has got keen links with early Christianity in the area. It's likely that the people naturally, like every other Roman site, would have adopted Christianity. Okay, and there's talk that there's talk at the site, the Roman villa may have actually been one of the localities of a really early Christian church for the area as well. That's not been proven, but again, both sites have got this really nice, keen Christian link. And it's mentioned in here about burials being there, where we've got a mausoleum at our site, and we've got a mausoleum there, and it's mentioning a coffin and various other bits and pieces there. So moving on, see if we can see some more images, which we're going to do now. So there you go. You can see the triclinium, the big dining room or the reception room. So you'd have gone in from this side through one set of doors, another set of doors, and then another set of doors, and then you'd come into this area, and it'd have been beautifully lit. There'd be natural light streaming in there. There'd be really narrow windows, so that light would come in, nice blue glass from Syria. It would have been a beautifully lit room, a beautifully lit area. And I've got to say this, which may come as some surprise, but may not have come as some surprise to some of you. Roman households consumed a hell of a lot of material in the form of timber, wood, and coal and charcoal to keep the furnaces burning, right? To keep the house warm. As you know, as we're told, aren't we? We're told that we should keep our central heating on 24/7. We're told that, aren't we? We're supposed to keep this on 24/7, which is actually very expensive, and you can't do it because it's just so expensive. Okay, our central heating in our house goes on about 3 hours a day, and that's it, because we just cannot afford it. But Roman homes, we feel they must have had their central heating on most of the time, because if they hadn't, the wall plaster would have started coming off the walls, which it would do in a normal house, in a modern house, right? I know people who earn so much money that they keep their central heating on all the time at 30 degrees centigrade all the time, right? So you enter their houses and you almost need to take your clothes off straight away. There are people like that, and that was a Roman home. So that's the parallel. So they did that in the past, and they do that now. Okay. Other poorer Roman villa owners would have had their central heating system on now and again, like we do. So that's a parallel. Romans had glass windows. We've got glass windows. The difference is they didn't have electricity. We've got electricity, but naturally they would have had ample amounts of light with oil burners, candles, natural light coming in, and so on and so on. They would have had drainage, flushing toilets, naturally flushing toilets. And there's also something else. I can tell you look so many parallels. There's also something else which is going to blow your minds. Okay? A few years ago, I was watching it was one of those BBC programs like Horizon, right? And they wanted to rebuild a Roman bathhouse in Turkey. So they did the usual thing. They made such a bad job of it. It leaked. It was terrible, right? They didn't have a clue how to reconstruct this thing, but whatever. But one of the interesting things about this series that they had, right, was that you had the stoke hole where you're stoking the fire, and you had sort of the main furnace, and you had a flue which would lead under the floors, okay, which would heat the floors, and then all this would then exit through the walls. So you'd heat the walls. You'd have wall heating, which is not something we really have in our homes. You'd actually have wall heating, which would be great in our homes, but it's too expensive. And then the hot air would then go upstairs and heat the floor upstairs, and then would exit through the roof. It's fine, yeah? But they had this big, huge, sealed copper cauldron, right? Okay? A big copper chamber, right? And there was copper pipes coming off it. It's so obvious, doesn't it? Copper pipes going off it. And then you went into the area where there was a wash hand basin, right? And there was a little tap that would come on and off. So you had warm 24/7. Actually, that's the same in my house. So one thing that we do have, even though the central heating system in the house isn't on, the hot water is. So you put the tap on, got hot water. Well, they had it back then as well. That to me, other than not having electricity, is civilization. That is civilization in itself. There's something weird about this. When I'd say that 49%. No, start again. Do this again. 49 out of 50 of all the thousands of villas in Britain, okay, were owned and operated and run by one of us guys. Okay, one or two women who ran the household, but it's mainly men who run the household, and local people who would decide to take on Roman ways. Okay, but this is an interesting one. There's one or two Roman villas. They're really well built. Okay, they got hypercore system. They got pili, stacks of pili, which would support the floor level, suspended floors above, and all the rest of it. We found one or two of them where the central heating system was never ever switched on. Because what happened is the person who built the villa built it not knowing that that was the central heating system, right? Decided not to ever use it. And the archaeologists have excavated and thought, bloody hell, this is perfect, this is. It was never ever used. And I bet you, right, you know full well there are people out there who've had central heating systems put in their houses in Britain today. There's got probably thousands of them who've never ever put their central heating system on. We do it today. They did it in the past as well. Because they think, I don't know what this central heating system is. And the other thing as well is, I found, right, my partner, for example, if the central heating system goes down, she hasn't got a clue, right? It's modern central heating system. It's so difficult to put on, right? It's so difficult to reset and all the rest of it. It takes me 10 minutes to do. Somebody who doesn't have a clue, you're not going to even set it up, right? And we see that in the past as well. They went through the efforts of fitting this thing in, but they had no idea how it worked. I know it sounds simple, but it's not. They're thinking, well, you're thinking, how is that hole over here going to heat the room over here? Oh, sorry, I'm not going to bother. And because they're used to having a fire there, huddled around the fire. I know it sounds nuts, but it's not. It's not nuts at all. And what you would have done, you'd have taken your sandals off as you'd gone into that main room, and you'd be burning your feet, basically. Not really, but your feet would have felt the heat. So Lullingstone Roman Villa, we've looked at that, and what we want to do now is look at the sets of remains there. Look at the heights of the walls in the basement areas. Some of the walls still standing. It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. We've already seen that, so we've even got steps. That's an interesting one. Have I ever said to you, you may have heard me say this, steps are an indicator of civilization. Have I said that before? Whenever you see steps, it's almost as if people have leaped into the sublime, okay? For example, the buildings at the Minoan Temples at Knossos and Crete, the temples there have steps, right? Steps 3,600 years ago. The ancient Egyptians had steps to go into their sort of next floors of their building and so on. I know that's obvious. We in this country, for the most part of it, other than Orkney and Shetland, it's always them, there's no concept of a step. Steps weren't invented. We're not talking about inventing the wheel, yeah? Steps weren't invented. In Scotland, we have buildings known as brocks, yeah? They had steps going up, different levels and all the rest of it. But here, the idea of a step is basically unthought of in British archaeology. There are one or two examples of steps in Britain before the Romans get here, the Orkney and Shetland. But the idea of a step, it's civilization, strangely enough. You pick these things up after years. Look at the sets of remains there. Now, that there is the hypercore system. So that would place a jet of heat under the floor into the different rooms. It would spread out. And basically, what would happen is that the heat in the walls there would be something known as box tiles, right? It's no point having a central heating system which don't go anywhere. That's what they say about modern homes, isn't it? If you keep your windows closed all the time, right, you get condensation, your plastic comes off your walls, right? The Romans were better than that. They knew all that, right? So what you do, you have the box tiles in the wall underneath the plaster, and the heat would circulate from stoke hole furnace into the flue, and then it would circulate underneath all the floors, and it would be sucked up through the walls, really sucked up through the walls, and sometimes it was really, really hot. So you might actually have the frescoes. If it was so hot, I'm not really saying this, but it may have been so hot some days, particularly in Italy, that some of the frescoes may have started peeling off the walls. That's how hot these buildings could become if you did not regulate your furnaces. It's like today, isn't it? It really is like today. If you have them on full blast, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I could think if you have them on full blast, the paint's going to start to come off, and the wood around as well. I think it's quite possible. You see it on radiators at home, don't you? The paint peels off. And this is how powerful these structures were. And there you go. You've got a reconstruction. There's two reconstructions. You've got a mausoleum there, another temple in the background, but the temple we're talking about was actually in the building itself. You've got the bathhouse, okay, directly linked to it. And the more bathhouses, the more rhubarb. If you've ever heard that expression before, the more bathhouses you have, the more wealthier you are. Okay? So in other words, they would just, if you were so wealthy, you would have a couple of bathhouses. And I'm going to ask you all a really embarrassing question. How many bathrooms you got? How many bathrooms you got? How many bathrooms you got? How many bathrooms have I got? One. I mean, you must be so poor. I feel sorry for you. But that is the point, isn't it? Isn't it still in society? If somebody turns around and says, "Oh, I got 2 baths, I have." "Oh, I got 4.
These programs on television of building houses and they got 5 bathrooms.
That's because they're rich.
I never used my bathroom as a toilet.
Well, fair enough. What the hell was all that about? You only use the bathroom for a toilet.
Well, because the toilet is in the bathroom.
You never smell, so how do you wash?
I don't wash.
You don't wash?
Never.
If you go for so long without doing it, you don't need to.
I don't use toilet paper for those. I've got to squirt off. I only wash it in cold water.
I actually think I know all that, Michael, but is that true?
I never wash.
Hair's the same, isn't it? If you leave your hair for so long, it doesn't need to be washed anymore.
I only put a cup of cold water on it.
Yeah.
I haven't washed it for years.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. Hang on a minute. Hang on. What about swimming in your lake in France?
I don't put my head under.
You do swim in there? So you do have a bath?
Yeah, but that's only cold rainwater.
Well, that's the best, isn't it? How the hell did we get onto this? Right, look. I think we need a break in a minute.
The body is self-regulating. All your protection is on your skin.
I can have another one of these.
People that wash it all off. I always got germs, cold, flu, whatever.
No, our doctor told me, my wife, she said, how many times do you shower? She said, twice a week. He said, all these people who shower 3 times a day and all this stuff. It takes all the protection of your body.
Do you know, I have completely lost my point. Yeah, I think I will. I've got it. Now you said that. The point is, people who've got more than one bath, they've got lots of money. Anyway, moving on. There's another sketch here. I have to. Right, there you go. Right. So obviously, the sea scene up there, right, is Bellerophon. I think we got a close up of that. Chasing after the Chimera. And there's Europa being kidnapped by Jupiter dressed up as a bull. But the point is that must look really beautiful in as you're looking at. That must be really beautiful. So that's basically the size of from the end of that white thing of the heater. No, this side all the way over here. So it's really huge. So the amount of mosaic pieces in there, the amount of work that must have gone into that is astronomical. Astronomical. Are we gonna?
I was going to ask you, what was the name of, what was that name you said about the thing that you didn't know the name of? The sign of Christianity sign?
Chirho, Chirho. Altairo. It's not Chirho at all. It's just how I've known it all my life. We did it in religious studies in school. We spent about a whole day on it.
We got a nice cover of bed around the Isle of Wight.
Oh, I knew it. I'm breeding. Yes, breeding. Yeah, there's a beautiful one on the Isle of Wight with it's like a beautiful hanger over it. Right?
Time in Dapper Dig, the other side of the valley, found a Roman camp, marks and ground and everything. And it used to be flooded. There's a river up there. The Roman ships used to come up, they drained it for a barrier with the railway across that.
Oh, fab. Fab.
This fella says there's a fort somewhere near Llanharry.
What's that?
This guy, Geraint Lewis.
Is that Geraint Lewis work for Rhondda and Tough?
I think he might be right. He works for someone like that. He came to the scout camp last Thursday.
Yeah.
And first of all, he drove in. Now, he was in the van, but I don't think there's anything on it. And we flare on nostrils because they use it in their turning.
Do you know, I think I've lost the plot to this, man. I think this is a good point to have a break. Right, carry on.
And I said, you lost? Because they all come in and I'm a bit sarcastic with them. And he said he's looking for a fort. He said there's a fort around there and there were 400 Romans there. And I said, oh. So we talked to him about it and I said, have you ever heard of I've remembered your first name, that's about all. So what I said, I'll give you
What is this exactly?
Geraint Lewis.
Where was he saying this fort is? I can tell you.
somewhere near Pontyclun, Llanharan area.
Oh, Pennacoidca, Roman fort. Yeah, Pennacoidca. He was in the wrong place. He should have gone a bit further over. Well, no, it's between. It's between Pontypridd and Llantrisant, so yeah, it's sort of that way. Yeah, that's the one. Why was he looking for it for?
Well, first of all, I was a bit leery because there's a metal detector as well. When he does go looking for these places.
So you mentioned me, did you?
I said, have you ever heard of?
What did he say?
He said, I don't know. So maybe he did, but he didn't want to tell me. So I said, well, give me a telephone number and I'll give it to you.
Go on. No, it's not the same Gerard Lewis.
When I said that he runs his courses,
yeah.
He said he might get that. That's interesting.
Okay.
He might want to come, so I thought I got his number. You got his number.
Good. We got his number. Okay, then on that note, we're going to give it a break because at some point there I lost the plot, didn't I? Right. Okay, then let's have a break. Sometimes I think people think I'm nuts. Right.
No, we don't think that at all.
This again is the Lullingstone Roman Villa. So so obviously, as it's developed, so obviously the main hub of the structure, and it's developed, and obviously this wonderful hypercourse system, the wonderful bathhouse on the side, and this building itself is a sign that these people are actually going places. You've even got 2 rows of steps here on either side, one there and one there in the plan. Anyway, moving on.
Can I just tell you something?
Yeah, go for it.
They're going to put some new water pipes in Newport, and they dug the ground up and they found these elm trunks.
Oh, lush!
There was a water course made from elm trunks.
Yeah, that's right. The Romans did that, yeah. Hollowed out trunks, bind them together, and you got piping then. That happened. I've seen that anyway. So there you go. On this end, hang on, just show you that there, with the steps leading into a room. This is where the chapel is. Okay, is this building here. So you've got this showing the Christian church or the Christian chapel with the Cairo designs, which we know we've got from the fragments of plaster found, and you've got underneath you've got the basement for the household shrine down below. So that's what that is. So this is, and you've obviously got the complete room intact down below. So in here collapsed, a couple of statues, all the plaster collapsed into it, everything. That's how we've got it so well preserved. So yeah, so they went down into it, yeah. But there you go. You've got that there, and you've got the wonderful height of it. Oh Christ, you can't really see it. Yes. Again, that idea of the stairs, those steps. So that's the floor there, and you've got steps. You've got steps here leading down into the side, into another room, into this room down below. And there's more painted plaster down below, but you can't actually see it in this illustration, which is a bit of a shame. And there you go. There's the room. So you can get an idea of what's going on with this site and the different layers. In Britain, Roman remains, you don't get 4 or 5 meters of wall standing in Roman Britain usually. But because this is a basement and you've got part of the ground floor above as well, this is what you've got surviving, a wonderful niche there through the different changes of what that room was used for. And there's that. So these are all the fragments that survived, and this is what they've done with the reconstruction. The Romans used to love their. There you go. That's it showing on the side, if you can see that. So the Chio. So that the X is the Chio, and the P representing the P, which is basically which was the secret symbol of Christianity associated with the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. So, and actually later on, the Roman army used to put this on their shields.
Is that a bit something like the Star
Well, I'm not going to go as far as that, but that's basically how this developed. To be honest with you, Michael, all these religions are linked in one way or another. And there it is. There's there he is on his horse, hunting the chimera. So he's got a spear going into chimera with blood spurting everywhere. So the chimera was a bit of a lion-type beast with the sea scenes around the outside. So you can see this is a close-up, you can see the mosaic pieces, so they'd be about that size, the tessera. Some mosaic pieces would be very small to get the detail for, say, the eyes, for example. So these are sea beasts. Which one? What did you say there? Really? Max Bygraves? No. Max Voice. No, I've heard of that one. No.
The English used to sing their own version of Archaeology, and the thing he said, but of course on the last line, as the English says, Harry's got a horse, Archaeology.
Sometimes I think when people open their mouths, right, it's got absolutely nothing to do with what I'm doing. Not quite, I'm close on doing that. We got 10 minutes of the Llantwit major Roman villa near us. Well, about 15 minutes actually. So here we go. No, you can't have your tenner back. Oh my God! There's only one £10 note here. I wonder how. Oh, do you know, I really want to do it. Oh my God! There's two £5 notes here. That must be a tenner. Oh, Brian, I'm sorry.
What you didn't get was the fact that the two notes were stuck together perfectly each other, so you couldn't see the joint. So only when I moved my hand like that, accidentally, I saw those two £10 notes there. This is the thing with bloody £10 notes now, isn't it?
Not come in with £2 coins and then put together.
Oh no! I just want to. I want to get on. I deserve that, didn't I?
What?
That was on me then. Oh, just shut up and just agree with me, okay? Agree. Right, the Roman villa at Llantwit Major, otherwise known as Llanmaes Archaeology, excavated in 1886, 1887, late 1930s and 1948, as we've already said. Most of these sites would have probably been associated with the one at Lullingstone, our site as well, were probably associated with earlier sites from the Iron Age as well. Because the point is that, Brian, we're going to raise your profile in the room now to be really positive. Brian, he thinks of the Romans as being masterful, butch, wonderful conquerors of the world. And Brian, to impress his newly married wife, decides to adopt Roman civilization and build in the Roman ways. So he builds a hypercore system the wrong way round, and the plaster is painted the wrong way as well. The mosaics are all over the place, but Brian's made a good start in being the embodiment of Rome. Pax Romana. This is me at my best. Right. This is Brian Pax Romana. So Brian was one of those common or garden local lords who decides to come into Roman civilization. He builds like a Roman, and that's exactly what's happened. So Brian, This is what's going on at Lullingstone, and this is what's going on at our site, okay? But you could never figure out how to work the hypercore system. But we've all got our faults. Fair enough, fair enough. So, with all this being said, we've got the site which was discovered in 1886, 1887, and again in the 1970s, in the wonderful, fateful room 8 and 9. When they were excavating, nice story associated with this. When he was excavating in the main room where the mosaic was, he found directly above the mosaic over 30 individuals that had been decapitated, and a horse that had also had his head cut off, right? In this main room where the mosaic was, at our site. This was John Story excavated in the 1880s. And they all turned out to be male. So the assumption John Story made, which is the type of assumption you'd make when you were being taught history in school, that when Roman civilization was starting to fall apart in Britain in the 300s and the 400s, right? The women were being taken away, and the men were being butchered, and everyone else was being put into slavery. That's what we were told in school, right? And that's when I was in school in the 1980s. That's when you were in school in the 1880s, Brian. That's before you retired. My head's gone. Anyway, so the point being, the point being, right, he made the right assumption. He believed that all these bodies were associated with the men left behind and the women had been taken off. That was the assumption, and everybody believed it for years, right? And then they also found through the mosaic floor two bodies two graves had been cut and two bodies had been placed through the mosaic flooring of the building, right? So they all thought, right, actually these two bodies and the other bodies found on the site and these over 30 individuals found on top of the mosaic floor, not cut into the mosaic, on top of the mosaic floor, were all people who had been butchered and sort of, whatever, yeah? And the ones that did survive the butchering were decapitated. With a full story, we could go on forever. But the fact of the matter is, the assumption was right, except they started to examine the bones really recently, right in the past decade or so. And they found something really shocking, something extremely shocking. That those 30 individuals were not from around here at all. They were from up north way, more likely to be from Ireland and the furthest reaches of Scotland. And they started to realise that when whoever came to the shores of South Wales, sometime in around the 300s, between about 300 and 350, the people who owned the house had abandoned that part of the building, and we got evidence that they continued using the rest of the building, the hypercore system and all the rest of it. But when they were attacked or something happened, they would have only been men that attacked the building. They were all beheaded ceremoniously, and then all their bodies just chucked into the room, and the building allowed to collapse. That was us doing it to them, not the other way around. And that was shocking. Because it's always thought that, the local people who owned these Roman villas now were too vulnerable and they couldn't defend themselves. They defended themselves and they killed them all. That's the difference. And to have between about 30 and 40 people would be the average type of vessel which was doing the raiding in the 300, 400, 500s. That's the most number of people you would have had on a vessel back then anyway. So that worked out quite well. And then the other people that they found, not only the people being found buried that had been cut, the graves had been cut actually in the mosaic, it actually turned out that the DNA were of local people who were buried naturally at a place that they once lived. They were buried also in that room, but they were buried with honours. That's what we learned. So history, in that one moment, at our site, completely changed on its head, completely rewrote the history books And that is really, really important. And then it says at the bottom here, no evidence has been found to support the suggestion that the villa was somehow associated with St. Illtyd, who founded the church at Llantwit Major in the 500s. I don't actually believe that at all. But what I do believe is that the original people that lived at the site converted to Christianity. Yeah? It's nothing to do with St. Illtyd. Converted to Christianity, because to be honest with you, right, it's not me guessing. If they hadn't converted to Christianity, right, they wouldn't have been able to live there anymore. As the site was still being used in the late 300s, early 400s, everybody in Britain had to be a Christian, right? There was no doubt about it. That was the doctrine. So we know whoever lived there would have been Christian, because if they weren't, they wouldn't have been able to live there. That's a fact. That gives you an idea. If any of you know Llantwit Major on the coast, as you go to Llantwit Major on this sort of coast road, it's called, just on the outskirts, you've got all these your big buildings. As you drive in there, down one of the roads called the Great House, you drive down this road to the town centre. Over here, not too far, you can actually see it from the train as you go past. That's where the Roman villa is. And that word tumulus is associated with a mound in the field, and that tumulus itself is directly associated with the descendants of the Roman villa. And we would put it by there, where the cursor is. That's where the Roman villa is. Just a bit of information, which we've probably already done. The site has been excavated over a period of time. It's a big complex, like the one you described. The one you described was a big house. That's more like the one at Lullingstone. If you noticed, it said that the building at Lullingstone was about 100 meters in length, so it was a huge building. I've no idea what the length of this building is. Don't know.
It's 30 foot wide.
So it'd be about 45 meters in length.
Yeah.
So the one at Lullingstone is twice the length of this. The difference with the one at Llantwit Major is that the whole complex, they've got quite small buildings really, arranged around two courtyards that we're going to see. The maximum length is 78 meters. So the complex, the whole buildings and the ancillary buildings all together enclosed in one area at our site was under 100 meters. The one building at Lullingstone alone, the big building, was 100 meters in length itself. So whatever buildings were around the outside, which were being excavated in the 1890s, which I haven't mentioned, are part of what you described. Sort of everything in one sort of big unit. That's what we described at the beginning. We'll look at a little bit of a plan, but when they excavated the site at Llantwit Major, our site, lots of the wonderful carved columns that did survive when John Story excavated, most of them have been removed, were Bath stone. Similarly, at the one at Lullingstone, they would have brought in other stone as well to be carved. Actually, most of the stone at Lullingstone would have had to have been brought in because most of the stone is chalk down there. So you'd have had to brought the stone in. There's a similarity. Finials for the ends of the roofs, beautifully carved out of stone. Some of the ridge pieces carved out of stone, not tile, stone. Pennant sandstone roofs, as mentioned, really nice roofs, which stands out a Roman villa. That's what a Roman villa is. It says that 6 rooms and contained an apartment with walls decorated with coloured patterned plaster, which we see at Lullingstone as well. Mosaic floors that we see at Lullingstone as well. Difference is that we don't get the wonderful designs that we see at Lullingstone. They were sort of spiral designs and sort of checkerbook designs and galosh design. Galosh is like overlapping knot pattern, which would go around the outside. That's a galosh design, which we saw at our site, but not the advanced designs that we see at Lullingstone. That's the difference. And it's smaller. That's the other difference. Lots of tiles, same as Lullingstone. Window glass at our site, yes, we did have glass in Wales in the Roman period, like Lullingstone as well. Sculptured figures that we see at Lullingstone, knives, nails, horseshoes, and so on, and human remains, coins, and pottery by the bucket load. So all those similarities, that's Roman civilization. All that stuff tells us of a Roman villa. Actually, when you go get your bus.
What to? You going Ponty? Because I'm going Ponty. I'm going through both of Ponty.
Yeah, you drop you off.
Yeah.
I'm only going to be another couple of minutes.
That's all right.
Shh. Stop.
Oh.
Stop talking. We've got to finish this. All right. It's about me, not you. Right.
Do you get paid? I don't.
All right, fair enough. That's the bathhouse there. That little thing there, that little is a little cold bath. It's I've seen it. It's tiny. It's about that size, right? There'd be a little bit of a cold bath there. So that would be the frigidarium, which would be the cold bath. Tepidarium, which would be a warmer bath, and coldarium, which would be the hot bath. It's a weird calling it a coldarium when it's hot. Hypercourse there, all the way around the building. You got 1 courtyard, 2 courtyard, 8 and 9. That's where the mosaic flooring would have been. Around here would have been a nice veranda with Roman columns. And you've got all these buildings around the central courtyard, and probably around here as well, there would have been a ditch around it, okay, which would have been based around the ditch around it would have been based around where the original ditch was around the Iron Age site before this Roman villa was constructed. So it's a wonderful, nice arrangement. When most of the archaeologists haven't actually excavated inside the rooms, they've just followed the walls. So most of the evidence is still there, but they did actually excavate the mosaic building. There's probably a lot more interesting stuff there. And look at that there. Again, the representation of a swastika as we saw at Lullingstone, the galosh pattern around the outside, bit knot work pattern. This is what we found at the Roman villa at our site. That's some of it anyway. And there it is from above. So the train, you go on a train here, and you look on the right, and you can see all these humps and bumps. And it's quite clear if you ever go through the Vale of Glamorgan from Barry to Bridgend, you can actually see the Roman villa from the train. And
Is there general answers to that?
No, there ain't. Don't tell me there's a photograph of her in there.
And there's an aerial view of one of these places, a Romano.
That's right. There's a footpath that runs along here. If you follow the cursor, you can see it. But the site, even though it's a protected ancient monument, you can't actually get on it, which is a bit of a shame, really. Every time I've been there, I've had to chase a sheep off the land and look around it. There's a bit of the ditch there running around the outside as well. You can clearly see that. And there's a bit of the Roman column, and that's a grinding wheel there as well. So this is all dating back to images taken. I do believe these are actually images from the 1880s, not the 1940s, because there's still a lot of stuff there, and there's for drainage as well. And that is a reconstruction. You can see that. All the humps and bumps at Dinas Palace. That's a farmstead rather than a villa. So we've got the reconstruction there in the background. All these buildings. And as we move on again, that is another reconstruction of what it used to look like. The one previous is probably more like what it would have looked like. But there is one downside about all this. Probably not all these buildings would have been standing at the same time. They would have been probably standing at numbers at different times in history. Some had thatched roofs, some had tile roofs. You can see around the outside you've got a bit of a veranda where you'd have found all the columns. And there it is from above as well. And there's a bit of a drainage ditch along here. We don't really know what that is. It's been filled in now. And since in the past 3 decades, right, we've only known about 2 or 3 of these on here. One in Ely Racecourse, which is still there, which is protected, and the one at Llantwit Major. Those are basically the only ones that we'd have known about. One, maybe the Dannegraig ones, and things that have been found since. We've got them in Ceredigion, near Aberystwyth, Monmouthshire. We're getting them in Pembroke as well. These Roman villas that are being found, which didn't exist 3 decades ago. And if these Roman villas had kept being used for another 100 years, they'd have turned out like these examples, which have been excavated over the years in France. That in France is just one set of, that's a bathhouse in France associated with the Roman villa. So the Roman villas were massive. On that note, smack on giving you your complete 1.5 hours if I'd have started at 10 o'clock. Any questions? On a final note, Brian, I can't avoid this. What did 2 £10 notes add up to? Brian, you've got the honour today. Have you got any questions?
Yeah, you missed this. The important part of the 2 £10 notes is that they were totally superimposed on each other. And when I put them out of my pocket, it looked like one £10 note. There's only when I slipped like that they parted.
Brian,
You don't believe me?
I got to be honest with you, right? You could have asked a question then, and you've just dug yourself an even deeper hole.
No, I haven't. I know exactly what I'm saying.
He was happy.
Well, you thought you had 10, how we got 20?
No, he hasn't. No. He thought he had.
I thought.
No, hang on. No, I do this. No, I do the jokes here, right? You thought you had 10, and then you had 20, and you're 10 again.
I thought they had 15.
Oh,
A £10 note, a £5 note.
no,
Whereas
please.
in fact I had 25.
No, you've just made this so worse.
No. I thought I had £15. And I was going to give you the £5 note. And when I went to put the £10 note in my pocket, I found that it was 2 £10 notes. Yeah. So I'm going from here now with £15, and I thought that I only had that. Come in here.
On that note, are there any more questions?
Next week we may well be over there.
Good. Brian, I apologise for all the ribbing, but it's been fun. Anyway, have you all enjoyed today? Thank you very much. If you put the chairs away, I'll be very, very grateful.
I'll turn the heating off.
So you bloody... Hey, you better turn it off now, because Ella want it on.
So what's the whole people that join? Nobody ever comes to.
Yeah, anyone who joins, don't turn up again. No, Martin, because he can't do the day thing at this minute, he does my Skype class. So we still got Martin. Paul was half dying, so we won't see him for a while. What's that? Yes. Yeah. Yes, that's right, Penrith Mill.
What's happened to my Satan?
The mill? The mill is still there. It's apparently it's still there. Yes, my yes. My don't worry, my missus is onto that. She's planning to do something with that. Hang on, oi. Where's the other cup? Oh, I still got it. Sorry. Yeah, no, she's planning to do something with that. Right. So she's very interested in that. What did it used to look like when you were a child? Yeah. How long ago was this? They should be interested. 40 years. And one of the pine ends was still standing. Not 2 of them, but 1. That was fair enough. Was there any window still intact? No doorway? Yeah. Yeah. No, she's really interested and she'll be really pleased to hear this. We're talking about the Penry smoke. Talking about he remembers seeing it when it was one of the gable ends is still standing. Are you alright? No, you can't. But she's planning to do something with it. Oh, I'll give you that again, right? Yeah. I thought you would like that. I know. Oh my God, are you turning that way? No. You fell for that. I was embarrassed, but then I thought, let's just turn it around. Brian, right? I wonder what you're going to come up with next week. Oh, I don't know. I tell you what, right? For digging holes, right? He got out of it then. Hey, he's good at doing these interviews. Right, you get that sorted, right? Actually, do you know what I'm going to do, right? Whilst I'm packing up, right, I'm going to give you the almost job of untangling that crap. I'll look at that book and I will have a good thingy. And,
just drop it back when you're done with the new rush.
You any good at untangling?
Not really, because you've got that when you put it away.
Sometimes not. Sometimes not.